This is the largest tier list that we've ever made on YouTube. So if you're going to ever subscribe and hit the like button, do it for the editor right now. Okay, tier one, we are going to start it off with Jamar Chase at the 1 slot. And the only way I would not take Jamar is if you're drafting like a 10-team league where you only start 2 wide receivers, 1 flex, where wide receivers that we'll talk about later in this video, like Ibuka, are super easy to come by. There, maybe you push up the running backs like Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Jahmyr Gibbs. They will be my next 3 players. Yes, we are going to have Bijan Robinson as our running back 1. If you go through and you just take a little sneak peek at what Bijan Robinson did in the final 9 weeks of this past year, you will see that he averaged 21.3 points per game. If you look at what Bijan Robinson did in 2023 in the first 8 weeks of the second season, you'll see that that was down at 15.5. So while yes, it took Bijan Robinson a little bit of time to get going in his NFL career, at this point, Bijan Robinson is a running back that is in his prime, that is coming off a top 3 finish in the second half of the season, that played 79% of the snaps in that stretch. That was 6th in the NFL, 20 rushing attempts per game. That was 3rd in the NFL, according to flockfantasy.com, 4th in rushing yards per game, 4th in total touchdowns per game, 4th in total yards per game. So just a true bell cow running back that we can be really excited about. But to go over and look at what we are going to have with our next guy, we are going to be putting Saquon Barkley. Now with Barkley, I'm sure you already saw, but if you have not done so already, look up the Flock League on YouTube. You can see my fantasy football draft from this year. I took Saquon Barkley at pick 6. I was super excited to get him at that cost, and I would expect you're not going to see him go that late in your fantasy draft because this past year, Saquon Barkley was the #1 running back when it comes to just points per game. He was sitting at 22 points per contest. And if you actually look at the rushing touchdowns that you had from Jalen Hurts was actually up at the very top of the NFL with a total of 14 rush TDs because Barkley kept getting tackled at the 1. So while maybe the big rush attempts, the big long runs for Barkley regress a bit, at the end of the day, if he doesn't get tackled on the 1 as much, he could actually have a higher ceiling. Now, one thing that's a little concerning is if you go to the range of outcomes on flockfantasy.com and you put in Saquon Barkley, a lot of times you'll see that these age 27 running backs, they do get worse at age 28, which again is why I'm going to be putting Barkley behind Bijan. And I'm not going to fault you at all if you wanted to put Jahmyr Gibbs ahead of Saquon Barkley. If you're just using what we have with the range of outcomes tool, you'll see that Jahmyr Gibbs does historically have a better range of outcomes than Saquon Barkley because you don't see the same massive drop off a lot of times from the 22-year-old running back going into his age 23 season. Now, with that being said, the situations are maybe a little bit worse for Jahmyr Gibbs while it's the same for Saquon Barkley because you have the center retiring, you have the offensive coordinator change. Yes, Montgomery's another year older. Yes, they may feature Jahmyr Gibbs just a bit more, so I understand if you wanted to start your draft off with him, but I'm going to be going Barkley personally. And then with CeeDee Lamb, I know we keep referencing this, but if you go and look at the player comparison on flockfantasy.com and you actually look at what we have with CeeDee Lamb's games over the past 2 years when Dak Prescott played in comparison to Jamar Chase's games over the past 2 years when you add Joe Burrow, you can actually see that CeeDee Lamb is putting out the same exact output as Jamar Chase. Now this year you have George Pickens in town, so it is going to be a little bit tougher with the competition. And then I am going to move Justin Jefferson back into tier 1. Last time we made a wide receiver or an overall rankings tier list, we had Justin Jefferson to kick off the 2nd tier, but Jefferson's back at practice, so that's no longer a concern. Now the only issue is we just don't know what McCarthy's going to look like. Now going over to tier 2, this is going to be a very large tier. Now you can take these guys in whatever order you want. I'm going to be putting McCaffrey at 7. I am higher on McCaffrey than the other experts on flockfantasy.com, where he has an average ranking there of about 10 or 11, but I'm fine with you taking him at the very top of this tier. Just make sure you're not taking him in front of any of the top 6 options. With McCaffrey through his NFL career, it's either been he won you your league or he lost you it. We go and look at 2017, he was the RB3, 2018, the RB2, 2019, the RB1, 2020, he averaged 30 points per game, but got injured. 2021, he was the RB4, but he got injured, so he lost you those 2 years. But then 2022, the RB2. 2023, the RB1. And I know a lot of people want to say like, oh my gosh, well, Derrick Henry has some crazy upside, blah, blah, blah. Derrick Henry just posted the best year of his NFL career this past season, and he averaged 19.8 points per game. And if you actually compare this to what you have with Saquon Barkley from 2023, Barkley in 2023 was up at 24.5. So just realistically speaking, you don't have anywhere close to the same ceiling that you're going to get with Barkley with another running back like Derrick Henry in a full PPR format. Now, obviously, if you're not playing in a full PPR league, you need to make some adjustments. You're going to be moving up players like Derrick Henry. If you're in a non-PPR format, you're going to be moving up the quarterbacks. And also, you need to be making micro adjustments to these rankings dependent on if you're going to be drafting in a 10-team league or a 12-team league. Are you drafting in a league with one flex spot or two flex spots? Now, if you don't know how to make those adjustments, don't worry, I have you covered, because I made 50 custom draft sheets for you to use, and they are going to cover almost every league format. They are going to be covering every platform. And on top of that, they were just updated today on Friday. They're updated every Friday until the season starts. So if you want to get access to those, plus the range of outcomes tool, the trade calculator, the My Teams page, the trade finder, the player comparison, the updated rankings during the week, both rest of season and weekly, it's all on flockfantasy.com. Plus you get so much other cool information from other creators on the side as well. And not only is your decision to join the flock going to be the number one thing that wins you your league this year, but it's also going to be the cheapest decision that you can make as well, where it's only a $34 one-time payment, not even a subscription. And if you use code FLOCK, I'm going to be answering your start set questions and your trade questions in the live streams that we do every night during the year. You can find a link to that in the description and the comment section. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown will be my next receiver. I was shocked to see Amon-Ra St. Brown fall to the second round of the Flock League draft. And honestly, I believe Thomas took him there and he just got an incredible value, because you go through and you look at what Amon-Ra St. Brown has managed through his NFL career. You have just had consistency from him over the past 3 seasons, at least being a wide receiver 10. Over the past 2 years, he's been at least a top 5 wide receiver both seasons. You look at him in the range of outcomes tool, and you can see that he was only 25 years old. So now he's going into his age 26 season. And you know, at a very similar age 25 year to Amon-Ra St. Brown, it was Calvin Johnson. Calvin Johnson averaged 17.8 points per game at 25 years old. Amon-Ra is at 18.6. You know what Calvin Johnson did the following year? 22 points per game. Dez Bryant had a very similar season. You know what Dez Bryant did the following season? He averaged 19.75 points per game. So Amon-Ra is in his prime. He has a phenomenal role in this offense. The offense should regress a bit, which is why he's not a tier 1 player for me, but still super excited. Now let's go ahead and let's look at Ashton Jeanty. And I completely understand everybody's going to remember Bijan Robinson's rookie season, and they're naturally going to be scared to draft the rookie. Now, what we can do on flockfantasy.com is go over to the prospects page, and I can show you the only prospects to grade out with a FSC grade of 88 or higher. There's Ezekiel Elliott, Leonard Fournette, Ashton Jeanty, CMC, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley as a rookie was the running back 1 overall. You have Ezekiel Elliott as a rookie being the running back 1 overall. You had Christian McCaffrey as a rookie being the RB3 overall. The only running back that was disappointing, that was as good of a prospect as Ashton Jeanty, was Bijan Robinson. And Bijan turned out to be elite the second season, just took him a little bit of time. The only concern that I have with Jeanty is not that he's a rookie. I mean, I know that he is an absolute monster at football. The only concern that I have is the Raiders offense. Now, Nico Collins is also an absolute monster, and it looks like CJ Stroud's going to have no other option but to just throw the ball over and over and over again, given all the injuries that you have in Houston. You had Nico Collins over the past 2 seasons averaging 17 points per game both years. We go ahead and put Nico Collins into the player comparison tool. You can see that he had a very similar year this past year at 25 years old to Demaryius Thomas in 2012, and Demaryius Thomas the following season averaged 20 points per game. A.J. Brown followed up his age 25 season with 17 points per game, and they looked very similar. And if we're actually going to look at the situation this next year, if anything, it's really strong where you just have rookie competition and like Christian Kirk in the slot. Puka Nacua is an absolute crusher. I actually may need to move Puka Nacua ahead of Nico Collins because Matthew Stafford's back at practice. Puka Nacua, best rookie wide receiver season of all time, follows that up with him averaging 4 yards per route run this past year. Obviously, the snap rate was down because he got injured, but ultimately at the end of the day, he still demonstrated the elite level ceiling. I am way more concerned about Matthew Stafford's back than I would be of the addition to Davante Adams. I mean, there are going to be enough wide receiver points to go around here perfectly fine for both guys, assuming Matthew Stafford's fully healthy. And Puka Nacua's 2024 season looks very similar to what CeeDee Lamb did in 2022 at 23 years old. And the following season, CeeDee Lamb averaged 23 points per game. Now, going over to our next option, we are going to have Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers, in my opinion, is the 3rd or 4th most talented wide receiver in the NFL. The only reason I'm going to have him down here at wide receiver 7 is if you're looking at sports books, they are currently projecting out the Giants to be a bottom 5 offense in the league. And we have all that data posted on the site. Just go to the recent post section and then hit season-long player props. But with Malik Neighbors, if we do end up getting this offense saved by Jackson Dart, obviously as the ceiling to finish as wide receiver 1, the offense has to be a lot better though. Then let's move over to Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas was the wide receiver 12 last year in points per game. He was the wide receiver 4 in total points per game. And keep in mind, this dude was legitimately a rookie. Not only was he a rookie, but he got better as the season went on, which is 100% what you want to be seeing from these guys. And if we go through and we look at Brian Thomas's best comparable rookie seasons since the year 2008, you had Jamar Chase, AJ Green, Julio Jones, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, and Malik Neighbors. You should have Travis Hunter playing a considerable amount. That is true, but at the same time, frankly, it may not matter. I'm going over and looking at Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry in a non-PPR format is way higher in these rankings. Derrick Henry in a non-PPR format is tier 1. In a half PPR format, he jumps the receivers. So obviously, make sure you're using the draft sheets on the site to make those adjustments for your exact league settings. Derrick Henry posted the best season that he's had in quite some time this past year at 19.74 points per game. But at the same time, realistically speaking, you are looking at a running back that's going to be turning, I want to say 32 years old in January. And at the same time, there can be natural regression, not even given his age, given the potential step back from the Baltimore Ravens if they're not as good as they were. But not going to fault you for taking Derrick Henry as early as 7. Just for the love of God, don't take him in the top 6 unless you're playing in a non-PPR league. And then Devon Achane, I actually used to have over Derrick Henry, but with Achane dealing with the calf injury, I think it's easy to just move him to the bottom of this tier because all these players in this tier are so close for me that if somebody's injured versus somebody's healthy, I just probably prefer the healthy guy. Now, going over and looking at Brock Bowers to kick off tier 3 for us, this is very, very dependent on your exact league settings. Brock Bowers averaged 15.45 points per game, which wasn't that far off than like Brian Thomas, and you're getting these points at tight end. Now, at the same time, a lot of people are speculating that Geno Smith is actually going to be a better quarterback for Brock Bowers here. Now, the Michael Mayer usage in the preseason may be a little bit of a concern, but ultimately, at the end of the day, Brock Bowers is the best tight end in the NFL, not even remotely close. This tight end that, as a rookie, came through and averaged 2.25 yards per route run, had a 26% team target share, ran 31 routes a game. There's literally no hesitation in saying he's elite. Now, going over and looking at Chase Brown, I'm going to pray to God that Brian Robinson does not end up in Cincinnati to split this backfield, because for now, this depth chart is a wasteland beyond Chase Brown. If we go ahead and we look at the player comparison tool on flogfantasy.com and we put in Chase Brown's first 8 weeks in comparison to what you had with Chase Brown in the final 8 weeks of this past season, you will see that Chase Brown, once Zach Moss went down, turned into that legit league-winning running back. In weeks 10 through 17, Chase Brown actually went out there and he averaged 19.8 points per game. He was a top 3 running backs in targets per game, in receiving yards per game, in his snap rate, and at the same time, he was right up there top 5 in his rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line. So this is a good offense. Chase Brown has everything at the goal line. He has everything as a receiver. There's nothing else that you could ask for. Going over and looking at Bucky Irving, Bucky Irving actually went very early in the flock league. I know Zach wanted to go get his guy, and I'm not going to fault him for it either, because same thing, if we want to go over and we want to look at Bucky Irving with that player comparison tool and look at him in the first, say, 8 weeks versus the second half of the season, you will see that very similar to Chase Brown, this was the other elite level running back that you needed. And at the same time, you have Rachaad White banged up. This led to them just giving Bucky Irving legitimately every single snap with the starters in the preseason. They've came out and they've said that they believe that he can handle a larger workload. And yeah, if you're looking at the second half of the year for him, you actually can see jumps up to 79 rushing yards per game, 29 receiving yards per game, 108 total yards per game, weeks 9 through 17. And then our next 2 wide receivers are going to be Drake London and AJ Brown. Now, full transparency, if you were playing in a 12-team double flex format where we want to be building around wide receiver, I would be pushing both Drake London and AJ Brown ahead of the running backs and Brock Bowers to the very top of this tier. But I'm going to be making this rankings list as if you're playing in a 2 wide receiver single flex format, because as I'm reviewing teams that y'all send to me on flogfantasy.com every single day, the more and more I realize that the average person watching this video is playing in a league with 2 wide receivers, 1 flex. Both wide receivers were phenomenal this past season. Drake London finished as wide receiver 14. AJ Brown finished as wide receiver 13. I actually think the Philadelphia Eagles may end up throwing the ball a bit more this year, but obviously we're going to expect the natural regression for London. A lot of people are going to be super excited about the splits with Michael Penix. I would just warn that it was a very small sample if you're doing that. Going over and looking at Jonathan Taylor, I actually think that Jonathan Taylor gets a bump up with Daniel Jones being the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts, not because I think that all of a sudden the Colts are a 10 times better team. No, in reality, I think they're probably going to be bad either way, but Anthony Richardson would have had a low checkdown rate, and Anthony Richardson would have stolen rushing touchdowns at the goal line. Daniel Jones will probably be willing to dump the ball off a little bit more, and Daniel Jones will not take the same amount of rushing TDs. So that is good news for Jonathan Taylor. Going over and looking at Josh Jacobs, I mean, we are seeing every single year of his NFL career, besides the Raiders in 2023, he was a top 12 running back in fantasy. Every single year of his NFL career, besides the Raiders in 2023, or honestly, include him, he's played at least 13 games. So Josh Jacobs has maintained the ability to be available for you essentially every single week. And he's just giving you an incredibly high floor across the board. Going over and looking at Trey McBride, if you're playing in a double flex format, you're going to be moving Trey McBride down behind a lot of the receivers and a lot of the running backs that are ranked after him. However, in a single flex league, you should be incentivized to build around that elite tight end, to build around those elite level quarterbacks and get them in your lineup. That way you don't have to take some of those landmines in the middle rounds. So we're going to have Trey McBride, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson here at 23 through 25. And I would also be very excited about these players in 10-team draft formats, 8-team draft formats. But again, the deeper that you get, like if it's a 12-team format, 14-team league, and you're adding in additional flexes there, that's when you'd pivot over to the wide receivers and running backs. We have this all laid out in the draft sheets for you. But going over and looking at Ladd McConkey at 26, Ladd McConkey looks like he is set up to absolutely crush. Trey Harris is dealing with a small injury right now. The big Q is questionable for week 1, given the concussion he had in the preseason. The addition of Keenan Allen's going to scare me off Ladd just a bit. For that reason, I will take the elite quarterbacks and the elite tight ends over him, but ultimately Ladd's set up to crush, even if the offensive line looks a little worse than we thought it was going to. And then Kyren Williams at the same time looks to be a 3-down bell cow. I mean, the extension is super encouraging for Kyren. That is something that we really did want to see. If you look over the past 2 years on flockfantasy.com and look at Kyren Williams' snap rate in comparison to the other bell cow level running backs, you will see that Kyren Williams is one of the true 3-down workhorse running backs in the league. Going over and looking at Amari and Hampton, my opinion, if it wasn't for Ashton Genty, he would be viewed consensusly as an elite running back prospect. He has the size to be a bell cow. He demonstrated the bell cow ability in college. He's a great receiving back. He had elite athleticism at the NFL Combine. And at the same time, he gets the round 1 NFL draft capital. Every single box you would potentially want to see from a rookie running back, Amari and Hampton checks it as a prospect. Now, the thing that we have to be concerned with is, does this Chargers offense go downhill with their offensive line going from a top 3 unit in the NFL to now average with the best tackle that they had going down? So I'm going to slide Hampton down just a bit. If Najee ends up being anything at all, I would personally probably move Hampton to the bottom of this tier, or the tier below. Looking at T. Higgins, I took T. Higgins in the flock league this year. I absolutely love the value I got. My league is a double flex, 12-team full PPR format. I really wanted to build around receivers. He averaged 18.5 points per game this past season. Now, obviously, that looks to be much higher than what you had 2 years ago when he was at 11.5, 3 years ago when he was at 13. But the reality of the situation is T. Higgins plays a lot of these weeks where, I mean, he goes out there for 40% of the snaps, clearly injured, and for whatever reason, just trying to make it work. And then that drags down his actual game averages. But if you just played him when he's fully healthy, he crushes. Going over and looking at Mike Evans, we had to move Mike Evans up. Godwin's not coming back till October. Jalen McMillan is not coming back maybe till November. And Mike Evans, since the year 2016, has not had a single season where he did not average a top 12 wide receiver finish. And at the same time, since 2016, Mike Evans has played at least 14 games every year of his NFL career. So I think Evans is set up to absolutely crush. He had to be a big time riser for us. I am obviously a little concerned and a little hesitant given the fact he was drafted in 2014. I mean, this dude was in the same draft class as Sammy Watkins, Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham Jr., Brandon Cooks. Davante Adams and him are like the only two guys that are left from that. So obviously age is going to eventually catch up to him. Jackson Smith-Njigba is a wide receiver that's actually on the rise, where Evans, we should assume, is going to be on the fall at some point. With JSN, definitely really like him in full PPR formats. If you're playing in a half PPR league, or especially a non-PPR league, you are going to have to move him down a bit, just because we don't expect the big plays or the touchdowns to be very relevant with Darnold in at quarterback. Going over and looking at George Kittle, again, single flex format, getting an elite tight end like this is going to help you so damn much. He was the tight end 1 in points per game last year, averaged over 3 yards per route run. You have Juwan Jennings injured. You have Brandon Ayuk injured. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's just George Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, and Christian McCaffrey, and an offense that has a phenomenal schedule and projects to be top 10 in the NFL in total points scored. Jaden Daniels was the QB6 last year in points per game, but if you actually look at his stretch in the first 8 weeks versus stretch in the second 8 weeks, Jaden Daniels got significantly better as the year went on, so I'd expect that trend to continue. Going over and looking at James Cook, here James Cook gets the extension, and while yes, I am going to expect that we get some natural regression, where if we look at what James Cook provided in the first 2 years of his NFL career, according to flockfantasy.com, in the first 34 games of his career, he had 5 carries inside the 5-yard line. Now, in the last 16 games of his career, he had 15. So I'd imagine that this kind of splits somewhere in the middle. I'd imagine that you have more passing touchdowns in Buffalo this year, few less rushing. Tyreek Hill is a wide receiver we had to move down our rankings. Obviously, to see the massive fall from Tyreek from like 23 points per game down to 13 is just extremely concerning for a wide receiver his age that relies on athleticism. And also, if we just have, an ear to Miami, everything that's coming out of there is negative surrounding Tyreek. Going over and looking at Garrett Wilson, he fell to the 4th round of the Flock League. I think that Garrett Wilson is much more talented than this. To be honest with you, if I was building an NFL team, I'd rather have Garrett Wilson over JSN. I'd rather have him over T. Higgins. Hell, I think he'd be up there with Ladd McConkey for me. But the thing is, you are in what projects to be the lowest passing volume offense in the entire NFL. Justin Fields may be good from a fantasy perspective. Who knows? Hopefully he's good for the Jets this year. Probably not. But what I can tell you for certain is he's not going to be at the top of the NFL with his passing yards, passing touchdowns. I know he supported DJ Moore in one season that was elevated by one random Thursday night football game. And I understand, yes, that he did play with Garrett Wilson in college, but that's not too relevant for me. I'm going over and looking at Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison, wide receiver, 42 in points per game last season. Just the absolute roller coaster that you had. Wide receiver finish by week. Marvin Harrison, week 1, wide receiver 103. Week 2, wide receiver 1 overall. Week 3, wide receiver 20. Week 4, wide receiver 26. Week 5, 61. Week 6, 147. Week 7, 55. Week 8, wide receiver 4. Week 9, wide receiver 77. Then 14, 48, 21, 43, 66, 57. No type of consistency whatsoever. They're saying that he put on size. I don't know if that was the issue. I'll take a shot on him at the 3-4 turn. Obviously, he has at least a great prospect profile coming into the NFL. Jalen Hurts will be our next guy. Jalen Hurts, 3 straight seasons, at least being a top 5 quarterback in fantasy, 4 straight years averaging at least 20 points per game. And at the same time, there's been no player in the NFL to be this consistent with rushing touchdowns. He's had double-digit rushing TDs each season over the past 4. Alvin Kamara will be our next player. Obviously, with Alvin Kamara, everything's centered around the receiving. So if you're using the non-PPR sheets, you'll realize that Alvin Kamara is a lot lower in our running back rankings than he would be in a full PPR. The Saints offense is going to be garbage, so I'd imagine that the touchdown ceiling is going to be capped. Trevion Henderson, big-time riser. Just have to be super excited about what he showed in the preseason. Combine this with the fact that he was an elite running back prospect, and it's an absolute phenomenal situation. Davante Adams, again, I think a big issue that you're going to have with the Rams wide receivers here is what's going to be the situation with Matthew Stafford. And I've been fading Davante Adams since we've been drafting teams on Underdog since April. And my thought process was, I completely understand that this is a great situation and Matthew Stafford's fully healthy, but we at least have to acknowledge the fact that this dude's about to be 33 years old and he's on his 3rd team in 2 years. So I do think inherently there are some red flags, even if Davante Adams hasn't shown signs of slowing down yet. Breece Hall has increased his snap rate for 3 straight seasons from 49% to 61% to 72%. However, I think we need to be concerned with that actually going in the opposite direction with the new coaching staff. This new coaching staff comes from Detroit, where they saw David Montgomery and Breece Hall together splitting that workload successfully. And every single blurb that we've had out of the Jets camp this year has been, oh, okay, you are going to get more a Braylon Allen. You're going to get even some Isaiah Davis mixed in. And what did we see in the preseason? We saw Breece Hall playing like 61% of the snaps with the starters, which is down from last year. And at the same time, if we were going to be looking at Breece, the high value touches in New York's probably going to be the goal line work. Braylon Allen has the size where they may be indicating that that's what he's going to get. And then we'll go Kenneth Walker back to back. Kenneth Walker was the RB12 last year in points per game. And I know we talked about this early in the offseason, but a big thing that shocks a lot of people is that Kenneth Walker jumped from running 12 routes a game in 2023 to running over 20 routes per game in 2024 and seeing his target share in this offense jump from 7.5 to 14. Now, if you're using these rankings, there's a good shot you draft Xavier Worthy, and I honestly absolutely love it. I'll be honest with you, I'm biased, hook 'em horns. I mean, the final 3 relevant regular season games for the Kansas City Chiefs, Xavier Worthy had 11 targets, 9 targets. Xavier Worthy had 19.6 fantasy points, 20.5 fantasy points, 23 fantasy points. Rashee Rice going to get suspended at some point. You combine this with what we saw in the playoffs for Xavier Worthy, I don't really see how you can sit here and not understand that this is a 21-year-old round 1 NFL draft pick that, yes, took a little bit of time to get going, but clearly we are seeing him kind of take over this wide receiver room. I still expect that Rashee Rice will be ahead of him in games that he plays, but I don't know how many games we get out of Rice. Terry McLaurin will be our next receiver. Terry McLaurin jumps the wide receiver 16 in points per game this past season. Everything remained the same, though, from his targets per game, his receptions per game, his receiving yards per game, his target share in this offense, his yards per route run, his routes run. The only thing that changed was his touchdown rate. And obviously that's impacted by this offense being much better with Jaden Daniels. But for him to miss this much time, it is going to be something that's concerning for me. Going over and looking at DK Metcalf, I took DK Metcalf in the 5th round of the Flock League. So now all of a sudden I am rooting on my doppelganger. But same thing with Metcalf. We've seen him be a low-end wide receiver 2 forever. There's been 1 year his NFL career he's a wide receiver 1 year in his NFL career he's a wide receiver 3. The contract Pittsburgh gives him is encouraging, of course, where they clearly are planning on focusing everything through the air through Metcalf. But there's probably not going to be a lot of passing volume here. Devonta Smith is like my most drafted wide receiver at this point on Underdog. 3 straight seasons where he's been at least a mid wide receiver 2. We go back and look at this past year, and the Philadelphia Eagles were at the very bottom of the NFL when it comes to their overall passing volume. There's no way in hell that goes anywhere but up. So I think Devonta Smith can actually return a ton of value at this cost. Ted McMillan, elite wide receiver prospect. I know a lot of people are super encouraged by what they had with Bryce Young at the end of last year. I am a little reluctant to ignore the first year and a half for Bryce Young, where he wasn't just bad, but he was the worst quarterback in the entire NFL, and just say, okay, he had a good 5-game stretch, so now we should be excited about the Carolina Panthers offense. I'm not going to say you can't draft the dude. I think he's an elite wide receiver prospect. I think there's upside to Carolina, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of downside. I'd say the same thing with Chuba Hubbard here. Chuba Hubbard was one of our biggest misses last year, where I just spent the entire season saying, sell high, sell high, sell high. Jonathan Brooks is going to come in, and this will turn into a committee type situation. Jonathan Brooks came in and immediately tore his ACL, and then obviously Chuba Hubbard turned into an absolute workhorse running back, where in the final 7 weeks of the season, Chuba has 82%, 87%, 89%, 79, 97, 93, 84% of his team snaps. They do add Trevor Etienne and Rico Dowdle, though. Cortland Sutton will be our next receiver. Cortland Sutton in the second half of the season was phenomenal once you had the Bo Nix breakout, where, I mean, yes, early on in the year, 7.8, 3.6, 5.2, 0 points like in the first 7 weeks. But after week 7, he was an every week starter that kind of turned in to a difference-making player. DJ Moore will be my next wide receiver. I'm actually a lot higher on DJ Moore than the other experts on the site. Big reason being is I think that DJ Moore is still the wide receiver 1. We can see what Ben Johnson does with this offense, the improvements with the offensive line. I think everybody and their mom is expecting this to be the most improved offense this year, and I would probably stand by that. Travis Hunter will be our next guy. With Travis Hunter, reports are saying he's going to play 80% of the offensive snaps. The hope is he's never out there on defense. The realistic outcome is they probably put him out there for 10 snaps a game or whatever, just so they can get on ESPN and say, oh, look, Travis Hunter is playing both ways. But it seems like it's going to be situationally on the defensive side, and he's going to be playing the majority of the snaps on offense. Rashee Rice, absolute monster at the end of his rookie season in the beginning of year 2. You can see Rashee Rice at the end of 2023, his rookie year, had 24, 14, 18, 24, and 17 points. And we go to 2024, 17, 18, 29. So I would say Rashee Rice is definitely going to be the wide receiver 1 in Kansas City in the games that he plays. The issue, again, is we don't know what the suspension looks like at this point. RJ Harvey is listed as the running back 72 on the Denver Broncos depth chart. But in reality, when they went out there to play the preseason, you know who was in with the starters? RJ Harvey. So I probably can't tell you that this dude's 100% startable week 1. My general rule of thumb with all these rookies you're going to draft is you don't need to be starting them the week that they break out. You can put them on your bench, be excited about their late season upside, and then once we see the breakout, then you get them in the next week. James Conner will be our next running back. James Conner has never finished lower than the RB 15 in points per game. Now, James Conner has also only had one season ever when he played 16 games. It was this past year when I drafted him on the team of destiny. And thank you, Conner, for your service. Thank you for being my running back 1. You definitely saved my little booty. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this is a running back that's now going to be pushing close to 30, has a long injury history, and they're talking about Trey Benson being heavily involved. Jamison Williams will be our next wide receiver. Jamison, big time breakout from his second season, averaging 6.5 points per game up to 14 points per game this past year. New offensive coordinator in Detroit saying that they absolutely love Jamison. George Pickens, I understand that a lot of people are excited about him to be the most improved fantasy wide receiver this season. And I think there's a good shot that that happens. Now, at the same time, if we are going to be looking at the realistic outcome, I'm ranking him higher than he's ever finished in fantasy. George Pickens, through the first 3 years of his NFL career, points per game, wide receiver 45, wide receiver 35, wide receiver 38. So you have 2 wide receiver 4 seasons and a low end wide receiver 3 season. So I think Pickens definitely can make a larger impact in an offense that's going to have a lot more passing volume. I think Pickens is a really cool wide receiver to watch because he doesn't generate a lot of separation, but he does make phenomenal highlight grabs at the catch point. That's like great entertainment. But when it comes to actually, I don't know, drawing volume, I just don't know how much he's going to get next to Lamb. Now, Jalen Waddle will be our next guy. I think Waddle does benefit with Jonnu Smith getting dealt. But again, it just seems like everything coming out of Miami seems like this team's almost falling apart. I'm looking at DeAndre Swift. Every single year of his NFL career has been a top 24 running back. And at the same time, now you have the Chicago Bears projected out to be the most improved offense in the league, where the offensive line looks to be 10 times better. Not only does the offensive line look to be 10 times better, but you have the new change with the coaching staff indicating that they can possibly try to emulate what they did with the Detroit Lions over the past 2 seasons. Tony Pollard was a running back that I wasn't drafting early in the year. I was actually taking Tajay Spears instead because it's not like Tony Pollard was a super efficient running back over the past 2 seasons. He's had a 15% and a 16% juke rate, which fell off dramatically from the time he was a part-time player in Dallas. That's a concern for me, but at the end of the day with Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, who I was concerned with, now has a high ankle sprain. So Pollard looks like he may crush. Egbuka is maybe the largest riser that we have from the last time we made these rankings. Reason is, it looks like Godwin's injury was a lot more serious than we initially thought. Godwin's not going to go until October, and Jalen McMillan's not going to go until November. So we look at Baker Mayfield throwing 41 passing touchdowns last year, 4,500 passing yards. Egbuka being a phenomenal wide receiver prospect, and now he's going to be an every down player playing alongside Mike Evans. Definitely should be excited. Calvin Ridley will be our next guy with Calvin Ridley. Very old for him being drafted in 2018, but he stayed a while at Alabama. Last year, he was the wide receiver 39 in points per game. But again, we should expect that this offense can only get better with Cam Ward. Zay Flowers was the wide receiver 35 last year in points per game, and you had Lamar Jackson throwing for 41 passing touchdowns. I took Zay Flowers in the 6th round of the Flock League draft because it's a 12-team, 2 wide receiver double flex. Again, that's a format that if you're using the draft sheets, you'll see we want to be prioritizing wide receiver. However, if you're in like a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, there I'd be less excited about Zay Flowers. Joe Burrow will be our next name. With Joe Burrow, if you're drafting in like a league where people know what they're doing, he's probably going to go in the 6th round. If he falls to you at the end of the 6th, the beginning of the 7th, 100% take the dude. If you're drafting with some high school buddies, college buddies that may not be super sharp, may not know exactly what they should be doing, there you could see Joe Burrow go in like the 4th or the beginning of the 5th round, and there he should definitely be passing. Looking at Sam Laporta went at the 6-7 turn in the Flock League, which I really do like that price. And I actually drafted Laporta last year. I thought he was a phenomenal pick in the 4th round last season. Turned out to be a horrible pick. I think he was just injured though. As I remember, Laporta had some weird injury buzz in training camp last season. And then if we go through and we look at what happened with Laporta from weeks 1 through 10, in comparison to weeks 12 through 18, weeks 1 through 10, he ran 25, 44, 17, 17, 15, 22, 13, 15, 17 routes. And then in the final 7 or so weeks, he ran 29, 29, 35, 52, 23, 26, 25. So they started using him way more often. And with that in mind, he started producing. Now, going over and looking at Rome Odunze had a worse rookie season than Keon Coleman, and they go through and the new coaching staff decides to add in Luther Burden and Loveland. But again, this should be the most improved offense in the NFL this season. And at the same time, Rome is a wide receiver that was an elite prospect getting the top 10 NFL draft capital. David Montgomery will be our next running back. With Montgomery, he's never finished lower than RB22. And at the same time, we can confidently say that if Jahmyr Gibbs were to miss any time, Dave Montgomery would immediately be a borderline top 5 running back in my rankings that week. So you have the premium handcuff appeal. You have a relatively high floor. I am concerned that he's another year older. I'm concerned that the offensive coordinator's gone. I'm concerned that the offensive line may be a little bit worse. And the Lions scored the most points in the NFL last year. And right now, sportsbooks are projecting them out to be the 6th highest. So you will have some regression. Looking at Isaiah Pacheco, Pacheco was an absolute bum last year. Gets injured, does nothing when he returns. Super inefficient as well. 3.7 yards per attempt. An 8% juke rate is the very bottom of the NFL. But the hope that you have if you're drafting Isaiah Pacheco is that, it was just the injury. When he's fully healthy, he's going to be just fine. And then the wide receivers in this tier, we're going to have Chris Olave, Ricky Pearsall, Stephon Diggs, and Matthew Golden. Chris Olave is very similar to Jerry Jeudy in the next tier for me. Great wide receiver talent. Second worst offense in the NFL. At least that's what sportsbooks are saying. Ricky Pearsall, I think, is a much worse wide receiver than Chris Olave. But frankly, it doesn't matter. The Niners project to be a top 10 offense in the NFL. Juwan Jennings is injured. Brandon Ayuk may not come back until like week 10. And Stephon Diggs, I don't think he's that good. But ultimately, at the end of the day, he's like the only wide receiver that's relevant in New England. And a lot of people are super excited about Drake May in his second season. Matthew Golden, I'm not a big Jayden Reed believer. Jayden Reed got worse from year 1 to year 2. He doesn't play all the snaps. Matthew Golden's probably going to play all the snaps starting day 1. His prospect profile is very concerning. Don't get me wrong. You go and look at his metrics, his yards per route run, the whole 9 yards. It's gross, but the film guys absolutely loved him. Going over and looking at Caleb Johnson, Aaron Jones. With Caleb, right now he may be the running back 3 in Pittsburgh. You're not going to be able to draft him at the beginning of the year. Nathan, who took him in the flock league, I'm doing everything I can to send him a running back because I think he needs a starter week 1 because Caleb Johnson will not be that. Now, he is being a little bit stubborn with me, but that's something that we can discuss another time. Then going over and looking at what we have with the last running back in this tier, that is going to be Mr. Quinshon Judkins. I don't think this should be a surprise to anybody, but no, you should not take Quinshon Judkins in the 5th round of your fantasy football draft. If you get him in the 7th, get him in the 8th. Sure, I definitely think that he has the upside because I do view him as a phenomenal running back prospect. The issue is, at the time of this recording, he's not even signed with the Browns. The charges were dropped against him, but the NFL is doing their own investigation, and we have no idea if he will get suspended. Honestly, I don't think he will. I have a lot of money on him in underdog drafts, so I kind of hope he plays this year selfishly. But I think you'd need at least him to fall to round 7. Now, going over to tier 10, we are going to have TJ Hawkinson kicking us off. Now, actually, grab TJ Hawkinson in the 8th round of the flock league, and I absolutely love that price point because you go back and you look at TJ Hawkinson before the injury 2 years ago. The dude was the tight end 2 in points per game. We look at 2024, he ran 2.61 yards per route run. So ultimately, Hawkinson was elite 2 years ago. This past year, he was great from an efficiency standpoint. He just wasn't fully healthy, so obviously didn't run enough routes. And going over and looking at Mahomes, yes, over the past 2 seasons, Mahomes averaged about 17.5 points per game. Super disappointing. They haven't allowed him to throw the ball deep. They really have been a more conservative offense, play good defense. But you look at the previous 5 years, Patrick Mahomes was the QB1 in points per game during that stretch by a country mile. So we've seen the elite ceiling for Mahomes. He hasn't demonstrated it over the past 2 years, but there's always a chance that this offense does change. Jerry Jeudy, I think is very similar to Chris Olave. I think he's a phenomenal wide receiver talent, but it's the worst offense in the NFL. Juwan Jennings, I don't know if Juwan Jennings is any good, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been saying all offseason in best ball drafts how bad of a pick this dude is because he was going very early in underdog drafts. And we look at the first 3 years of his NFL career, 1.6, 1.5, 1.2 yards per route run. That's absolute garbage. Yes, this past season, He was great. But it was off of 3 games. 46 points against the Rams. 5.3 yards per out run in that game. 14.6 yards per target. Of course, that's going to inflate his numbers. If I look at Jauan Jennings through his entire NFL career, he started in 2021. He has played a total of 4 seasons, and he has 4 games in his NFL career with 20 fantasy points. So I'm not a big Jennings guy. I'm not a big Debo guy either. Debo may be set up in a decent little spot with a great quarterback play, great coaching staff. And then also, obviously, we do have the Terry McLaurin holdout. I actually need to move Josh Downs to the top of this tier given the Daniel Jones announcement. Daniel Jones is much, much better for Josh Downs than Anthony Richardson would have been. Again, I don't know if he's better for the Colts, but I do know Daniel Jones is going to score points through the air where Anthony Richardson would have taken some of those rushing touchdowns and those rushing yards himself. Going over and looking at Godwin. Godwin was the wide receiver 2 in points per game this past season. But again, the issue is not what he did this past year. The issue is when will he be healthy? Jordan Addison I'd have ranked higher than this if it wasn't for the 3-game suspension. But the 3-game suspension is going to be a little tough. Tyler Warren is skyrocketing up at this point with the preseason news. They're using him absolutely everywhere. He's playing every single snap. And again, Daniel Jones is a good thing for these pass catchers. Tyrone Tracy will be the last player in this tier. Tyrone Tracy looks like he's just locked down the starting job for the Giants early in the year, given the Cam Skattebo hamstring injury. However, my concern would be that Cam Skattebo turns this either into a committee or straight up takes the job in the second half of the season. Jacoby Myers is in a tough spot because the Raiders project to be a bottom 6 offense in the NFL. Myers over the past 3 years has been a top 30 wide receiver in fantasy. I think if you're in best ball, he's very exciting. The issue is if you're like in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex ESPN league, when can you actually get this dude into your starting lineup? And I know you are probably shocked to see the quarterbacks this low in these rankings. And if you're drafting in like an ESPN sleeper Yahoo redraft league, and you're drafting with people that don't know what they're doing, what is going to happen, I can almost guarantee it, is they're going to take a wide receiver running back, then wide receiver running back, then they're going to take another receiver, and they're going to be there in round 6 going, do I really take another wide receiver to put on my bench, or do I just take Baker Mayfield? They're going to take Baker Mayfield. So in reality, if you're following these rankings, you're not getting Baker. You're not getting Kyler. You're not getting Bo Nix. These guys are super exciting. They were phenomenal last season. At least Kyler's been a QB1 every year of his NFL career. The difficulty with it is you should definitely be hammering in the skill positions before they run out because there are so many late round quarterbacks that you can get. And if you really want to make sure that you get a great quarterback, I would just take Lamar, take Allen at the 2-3 turn, or take Daniels or Hurts at the 3-4 turn. Now, Jayden Reed will be our next player. Jayden Reed went from playing 57% of the snaps as a rookie to 64% of the snaps as a second-year player. Jayden Reed also went from wide receiver 24 in points per game as a rookie to wide receiver 41 as a second-year player. And I know people are going to say, oh, it's just because the Packers didn't throw the ball as much. Incorrect. Jayden Reed fell from 17% of his team's targets to 16% of his team's targets. So his target share actually went down. Looking at Joe Mixon, Joe Mixon's questionable for week 1 right now. We just have no idea when this dude's going to come back and actually play. Joe Mixon has been a top 11 running back every year of his NFL career. And this dude's played 8 seasons. So it's crazy to rank him as low as RB30. He's actually one of the younger running backs in the 2017 class. We just have no injury information on him. We just don't know if he's going to play at all this season. Jordan Mason will be our next back. They're saying that Jordan Mason's going to split the backfield with Aaron Jones. We are more so interested, obviously, given the elite handcuff appeal, if anything were to occur to Aaron Jones. Travis Kelce, this past season has fallen from 14.5 points per game to 12.5. And the previous year to that, he was at 18.5. So to go from 18 points per game to 14.5 points per game to 12.2 points per game, and you're 35 years old, this is just the sign of the fall off. We'll say. My girlfriend worked on Happy Gilmore too. She got to meet Travis Kelce. Said he was a super nice dude. So rooting for you, Kelce. Khalil Shakir, wide receiver 36 this past season. Over the past 3 years, he's increased his snap rate, his target share, his receptions per game, his fantasy points per game, his receiving yards per game, his touchdowns per game, his yards per route run, his target share in this offense, his routes in this offense. Like Shakir has turned himself into an every week player for a lot of deeper fantasy leagues. The concern would be the overall ceiling. Michael Pittman Jr. definitely more excited now that you have Daniel Jones. And then our last tier, we're going to have Mark Andrews here. Andrews looks to be exciting early in the year with the Isaiah Likely injury. Late in the year, it may be tougher if Likely comes back. And then looking at Jaylen Warren, I think he's going to be the starting running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers day one. The concern's going to be what happens over the course of the season when Caleb Johnson expands his role. Keon Coleman actually had a very comparable year to Rome Odunze as a rookie. The difference is Keon Coleman doesn't have as good as branding of Rome, I guess. Travis Etienne may just be the backup running back to Tank Bigsby in Jacksonville. I would prefer Etienne, hoping that he gets dealt to a good situation. And also, he just has more receiving upside than Bigsby. And then Cooper Kupp, our last wide receiver. I'm concerned with the overall offense. And at the same time, I'm concerned with the true ceiling. He has been the top 24 wide receiver in points per game over the past 2 seasons, though. But I think that's all I got for y'all in this video. Again, if you want draft sheets for your exact league, your settings, your platform, if you want updated weekly rankings and rest of season rankings through the entire year, my team's page where you can just absolutely dominate your league mates, a trade calculator, a trade finder, the whole 9 yards. It's all on flockfantasy.com. The $34 season pass gets you access to everything until January 1st. And if you use code FLOCK, you are going to be getting a free trade question and start sit question for me to answer during the season. And on top of that, it's not even a subscription. It's a one-time payment. It's the #1 tool for you to win your fantasy football league this year. And at the same time, it's the cheapest tool you could possibly get as well. But I really appreciate you, and I really hope I get to see you out in the live stream later tonight.